8 UK potato brands you must avoid at all cost. 8 UK potato brands you must avoid at all cost. I investigated recalls, acrylamide tests, allergen failures, metal contamination, and supermarket cover-ups to show how everyday potato products quietly expose families to chemical risks, safety breakdowns, and dangers nationwide. 8. M&S. Marks & Spencer. Marks & Spencer introduces a dangerous kind of risk because it wraps ordinary agricultural problems in premium confidence. This is a brand people stop questioning. Shoppers see the logo, see the price, and assume safety, freshness, and higher standards without verification. That blind trust is exactly why caution disappears. When consumers stop inspecting produce because they believe a retailer has already done it for them, problems slip through unnoticed. Higher price does not cancel out storage stress, supply chain pressure, or biological decay. It only hides it behind reassurance. Marks & Spencer sources potatoes through large, complex supplier networks built to guarantee perfect appearance and year-round availability, not peak freshness. To maintain that visual uniformity, potatoes are routinely kept in controlled storage for extended periods. Extended storage is not neutral. It increases the likelihood of sprouting, internal chemical changes, bitterness, and elevated solanine levels if temperature or light exposure drifts even slightly. These risks often do not show on the surface at purchase. They appear later in taste, texture, and shelf life when it is too late to return them. What looks premium on the shelf can already be stressed, aged produce underneath. That is why buying these potatoes based on brand trust rather than inspection is a gamble, not a guarantee. Transparency is a persistent weakness. Potato packaging rarely includes harvest dates, detailed farm origin, or storage duration. Shoppers cannot assess freshness or handle history. Premium branding fills that information gap, but branding is not evidence. When quality problems appear, consumers have no way to determine whether the issue is isolated or recurring. Customer feedback often points to inconsistency. Some bags perform well, while others soften quickly, taste bitter, or show internal discoloration within days. This inconsistency is common when sourcing from multiple growers under strict cosmetic standards. Potatoes that look flawless externally can still be stressed internally by transport and storage. Packaging practices add another risk layer. Marks & Spencer relies heavily on sealed plastic packs to preserve presentation. While this protects shelf appearance, it can trap moisture and accelerate spoilage after opening. Potatoes that seem premium at purchase may deteriorate rapidly at home, reducing value. From my perspective, the issue is not negligence, it is overconfidence. The brand's reputation encourages shoppers to trust without questioning freshness or sourcing. Premium pricing should deliver transparency, consistent quality, and verifiable standards. Until those assurances are visible, cautious buyers should inspect potatoes carefully, avoid storing them in light, and question shelf life claims. Premium labels do not remove agricultural variability, storage stress, or handling risk. And yet, as bad as is Marks & Spencer, the next brand moves from chemical risk to systemic neglect. 7. Rooster. I am warning people about Rooster potatoes because this variety has been normalized as a safe default while quietly delivering some of the worst consistency problems on UK shelves. Roosters is bred for yield, storage tolerance, and appearance, not eating quality. That breeding focus matters because it encourages long storage, aggressive handling, and repeated reconditioning before sale. Rooster potatoes are commonly kept in cold storage for extended periods to meet year-round demand. Extended storage increases sugar accumulation inside the tuber. When those sugars are cooked at high heat, they darken quickly, taste bitter, and raise acrylamide formation. This is why roosters so often burn on the outside while staying dense inside. That behavior is not bad luck. It is chemistry driven by storage stress. Another issue is solanine risk. Roosters are more prone to greening under light exposure during transport and retail display. Green patches are not cosmetic. They signal elevated glycoalkaloids that can cause nausea, headaches, and digestive distress. Many consumers trim and cook anyway, assuming heat fixes it. It does not. The toxin remains. Texture is another failure point. Roosters are marketed as all all-purpose, yet they regularly perform poorly across methods. They mash gummy, roast unevenly, and fry unpredictably. That inconsistency comes from variable dry matter caused by storage cycling and dehydration. One bag can behave differently from the next, which destroys reliability in home cooking. I also look at how roosters move through the supply chain. Because they are high yield and cheap, they are handled in bulk, stacked deep, and transported long distances. Bruising and internal damage often go unseen until the potato is cut. That hidden damage accelerates spoilage and bitterness after purchase. From my perspective, Rooster survives on habit, not merit. It is everywhere, cheap and familiar, so people keep buying it without questioning performance or safety. That familiarity masks risk. There are better varieties for specific uses that spend less time stressed in storage. If you want predictable cooking, lower chemical formation, and fewer unpleasant surprises, stop buying Rooster by default. Inspect aggressively, avoid green tubers, and choose varieties suited to your method. Convenience should never override quality or health. Treating Rooster as a universal potato is a mistake that costs taste, consistency, and safety over time, and the longer it dominates shelves, the more consumers accept avoidable problems as normal everyday cooking outcomes, without realizing better options exist nearby today. That is why I rank it second worst, because when danger becomes normal, it spreads quietly and widely. 6. Tesco. I am warning people about Tesco because this is where scale, cost pressure, and complacency collide. Tesco is the largest grocery retailer in the United Kingdom, and that dominance creates a dangerous illusion of reliability. When shoppers see Tesco potatoes, they assume basic standards are guaranteed. That assumption is exactly what allows quality problems to persist without real consumer resistance. Tesco sources potatoes through vast supplier networks designed to meet price targets first and freshness second. To keep shelves stocked year-round, potatoes are often stored for long periods in controlled environments before reaching stores. Extended storage stresses the tuber. It increases internal sugar conversion, raises the risk of bitterness, and leads to unpredictable cooking behavior. These changes are invisible at purchase, but obvious once the potato is cut or cooked. Customer complaints consistently point to early spoilage. Bags that look fine in store soften, sweat, or rot within days at home. That is not bad luck. It is a symptom of aged stock being pushed through distribution to meet volume demand. Tesco's scale means rotation speed varies wildly between stores, so quality depends more on location than brand promise. Greening and sprouting are another recurring issue. Potatoes exposed to light during transport or display develop elevated solanine levels, a natural toxin that causes bitterness and can trigger nausea and headaches. Many Tesco potatoes show early signs of this stress, yet remain on shelves because cosmetic standards focus on surface appearance, not chemical safety. Packaging worsens the problem. Tesco relies heavily on sealed plastic bags that trap moisture and accelerate decay after opening. Once condensation starts, spoilage spreads quickly through the bag. Consumers often discover the issue only after bringing the potatoes home. From my perspective, Tesco potatoes represent systemic compromise. The retailer's size prioritizes consistency of supply over consistency of quality. When problems arise, individual consumers absorb the loss, not the company. Tesco sells volume, not accountability. If you buy Tesco potatoes, inspect every bag carefully, avoid bulk packs, and reject anything showing softness, greening, or condensation. Better still, look elsewhere. A trusted logo does not protect you from storage stress, chemical changes, or poor rotation. Habit keeps Tesco potatoes moving. Scrutiny should stop them, and yet even Tesco is still operating within a branded system that can be scrutinized. The next entry removes even that layer of accountability. 5. Asda own potato brand. Asda's own potato brand pushes this list into more uncomfortable territory because it exposes what cost-driven sourcing really looks like in fresh produce. When price is the primary selling point, quality control becomes negotiable. Asda potatoes are designed to be cheap, plentiful, and always available, and that business model creates predictable problems before the bag even reaches the shelf. Asda sources potatoes at massive scale to meet constant demand. To maintain low prices year-round, potatoes are often hard harvested early, stored for extended periods, and pushed through long distribution chains. Extended storage stresses the tuber. It accelerates internal sugar changes, increases the likelihood of sprouting, and raises the risk of bitterness and elevated solanine levels if storage conditions drift. These changes are not obvious at purchase. They show up later when the potato is cut, cooked, or tastes wrong. What concerns me most is frequency of use. Asda potatoes are positioned as everyday staples. Families buy large bags. They are used repeatedly across meals without inspection. That means any storage or handling flaw is not an isolated incident. It becomes routine exposure. When compromised produce is consumed regularly, small quality failures stop being harmless. There is also a serious accountability gap. Own brand potatoes do not carry reputational weight. If quality slips, there is no brand reputation to defend, only a price point to protect. Bags change design, suppliers rotate, and problems fade quietly without explanation. I looked for clear public commitments around storage transparency, harvest timing, or solanine risk communication, and I found almost nothing directed at consumers. That silence matters. Quality complaints around Asda potatoes are consistent. Soft texture, internal rot, rapid spoilage, and uneven performance are common reports. These are not cosmetic issues. They are signs of stressed produce moving too slowly through the system. What makes Asda worse than some competitors is how invisible the compromise feels. Cheap pricing lowers scrutiny. Shoppers assume potatoes are simple and safe. That assumption is exploited. When food becomes background routine, risk shifts entirely onto the consumer. From my perspective, Asda potatoes are not dangerous because of one scandal. They are dangerous because the system rewards volume over care. Until transparency improves around sourcing, storage duration, and quality controls, avoidance is the smarter option. Cheap staples should not come with silent trade-offs that only reveal themselves after purchase. And from here, the risk shifts again, because next we move beyond chemical exposure and into direct safety failures that should never happen in the first place. 4. Morrisons. This is where the story stops being about isolated defects and starts being about systems that quietly fail at scale. I rank Morrisons' own brand potatoes here because they sit at the intersection of repetition, volume, and weak accountability. As a major supermarket supplier, Morrisons moves huge quantities of fresh potatoes every week, and that scale magnifies every sourcing and storage decision it makes. What worries me most is how invisible quality risk becomes. Morrisons potatoes are sold as everyday staples, not specialty produce. They are stacked in bulk, bundled into value offers, and bought without inspection. That matters because fresh potatoes are sensitive to light, temperature, and time. When handling slips, problems like sprouting, greening, internal rot, and bitterness develop quietly after purchase. I examined recurring consumer complaints and the pattern is consistent. Potatoes that soften within days, bags with hidden rot, uneven cooking performance, and occasional green patches indicating elevated solanine. These are not rare accidents. They are signs of stressed produce moving too slowly through storage and distribution. Cosmetic grading often hides internal damage until the potato is cut open at home. The accountability gap is what pushes Morrisons higher on this list. Own brand potatoes do not carry individual producer reputations. If quality slips, suppliers rotate, packaging changes, and the issue fades without explanation. I found little consumer-facing information about harvest timing, storage duration, or light exposure controls. Silence here is not neutrality, it is avoidance. Morrisons positions itself as a community-focused retailer, which makes this more concerning. Trust is implied through branding, not proven through transparency. When shoppers rely on that trust instead of inspecting produce carefully, risk shifts onto the household. From my perspective, Morrisons potatoes are problematic because routine compromises are normalized. Until sourcing and storage accountability visible, caution is justified. Still, as concerning as this is, it remains a chemical risk layered into a processed snack. The next entry crosses a more serious line, because now we are no longer talking about what forms during cooking. We are talking about failures that triggered official recalls. Subscribe, like, and comment why you like this video for a chance to win a new Apple MacBook. 3. McCain frozen potato products. McCain sits higher on this list because this is where documented safety failures enter the picture. Multiple McCain frozen potato products sold in the United Kingdom were recalled after it emerged that they had not been properly assessed for allergen and safety compliance. That is not a minor paperwork issue. That is a system failure. When I read the recall notices, what stood out was the scope of the problem. This was not one obscure or limited product. Multiple lines across the range were affected at the same time. Customers were told not to eat products they had already purchased and stored in their homes. That instruction alone erodes trust immediately. Food safety is not optional, and allergen risk can be life-threatening. Frozen potato products already carry inherent risks before recalls even enter the discussion. They are heavily processed, pre-fried, and designed to be cooked again at home. That double cooking dramatically increases acrylamide formation, especially when consumers rely on color or texture rather than precise temperature guidance. Overcooking is common, and the chemical risk rises quickly and quietly. Add salt to that equation, and the health impact deepens further. Many McCain products are seasoned before they even reach the oven. Consumers then add more salt, oil, cheese, or sauces without thinking. The final meal becomes nutritionally dense and chemically altered. What began as a potato ends up far removed from anything resembling a simple food choice. What concerns me most is how deeply trusted McCain is as a brand. This name sits in freezers across the country. Parents buy it without hesitation. Restaurants serve it without question. When a brand operating at this scale fails basic safety assessment requirements, it sends a disturbing signal about oversight and internal controls. I do not see McCain as reckless or deliberately negligent. I see a company stretched thin by industrial scale production and regulatory complexity. High volume manufacturing creates pressure, speed, and blind spots. Blind spots in food safety are unacceptable. When errors appear at this level, avoidance becomes a rational and protective response. For me, this recall shifted McCain from a neutral freezer staple into a calculated risk. Convenience only works when safety is guaranteed. When assessment failures surface, the responsibility shifts back to the consumer. That means reading notices, checking batch codes, and questioning habits that once felt automatic. At that point, the product no longer saves time. It creates vigilance. In a food environment already crowded with hidden additives and chemical exposure, frozen potatoes should not require that level of scrutiny. The fact that they do is precisely why I rank this brand here and choose to leave it behind without hesitation. Trust once broken in food manufacturing rarely returns, and I am unwilling to gamble health on brand familiarity when safer, simpler alternatives exist in the same freezer aisle for families, children, and allergy-vulnerable households. At this point, we have moved beyond quiet chemical exposure and into confirmed breakdowns in quality control. And as bad as that sounds, the next entries move into even more direct and dangerous territory. 2. Aldi. This is where the conversation stops being abstract and becomes immediate. I rank Aldi-inspired cuisine baby potatoes this high because this was not about long-term exposure or statistical risk. This was about a direct failure that could have killed someone. The product was officially recalled in the United Kingdom after it was found to contain an undeclared milk allergen. That is not a hypothetical concern or a laboratory scenario. That is a real-world, documented danger with real consequences. If you have ever lived with someone who has a severe milk allergy, you understand how serious this kind of mistake can be. One bite can trigger anaphylaxis. One inaccurate label can turn an ordinary dinner into a medical emergency. When I read the recall notice, what struck me most was how ordinary the product appeared. Baby potatoes with herbs and butter, familiar food, comfort food, food people trust without hesitation. That sense of safety is exactly what makes this situation so dangerous. What makes this failure worse is the issue of trust. Aldi markets itself as efficient, reliable, and tightly controlled. Shoppers assume that the basics are covered. Accurate labeling is not an advanced safety feature. It is the most fundamental responsibility a food producer has. When that responsibility fails, it casts doubt on everything else. This was not a trace warning oversight or a vague cross-contamination concern. This was an undeclared allergen in a ready-to-eat product placed directly on shelves. Processed potato meals are especially risky because consumers do not expect hidden allergens. Potatoes are perceived as neutral and safe. They are often chosen specifically because they seem uncomplicated. That perception lowers caution. People do not double-check labels as aggressively. That is why this incident matters far beyond this single product. When a brand fails in a category people instinctively trust, it breaks the safety contract between producer and consumer. I also look at the system behind the failure. Ready meal-style potato products pass passed through multiple stages. Ingredients are sourced, cooked, seasoned, packaged, and labeled. An allergen failure does not happen at just one point. It indicates that multiple safeguards failed at the same time. That tells me the problem was structural rather than accidental or isolated. From my perspective, this is where avoidance becomes non-negotiable. Chemical exposure can be debated, additive thresholds can be argued, allergen failures cannot. The margin for error is zero. This incident alone is enough to justify permanently walking past the product without hesitation, and yet even this is not the worst case, because the final entry removes the consumer's ability to protect themselves at all. 2. Keeling. If the brands before this leaned on perception and routine, Keelings represents a different type of concern. The unseen risks that come with being a massive fresh produce distributor whose name gets plastered on bags, bins, and supermarket shelves without clear accountability. On the surface, Keelings presents itself as a 100% Irish-owned third-generation family business supplying fresh fruit, vegetables, salads, and potatoes across the UK and Ireland. But when you dig past the glossy brand story and into how fresh produce supply actually works, the picture is more complex and fraught with real consumer risks. Large fresh produce distributors like Keelings operate in a space where the consumer rarely sees the supply chain, and that creates multiple blind spots. Unlike small farms where produce can be traced directly to a field and a specific date, multinational distributors rely on multiple growers, third-party logistics, long storage periods, and complex batch blending before products hit supermarket shelves. That lack of traceability means quality controls often happen behind closed doors, and when things go wrong, consumers never see the full picture. One of the most common issues in fresh potato supply is storage and sprouting problems. Without tight temperature and humidity control, potatoes can develop green patches and increase solanine, a naturally occurring toxin that can cause bitterness, nausea, or even neurological discomfort when consumed in high quantities. For a large distributor moving tens of thousands of tons of produce annually, storage conditions can vary between facilities and seasonal peaks, and this variability often translates into inconsistent quality in consumer packs. Another hidden risk in broad-scale produce supply is pesticide residue inconsistency. While major buyers and supermarkets enforce residue limits, audits are not always consumer visible, and enforcement varies by region and season. Potatoes from major distributors sometimes have higher residues simply because they come from a wider pool of growers with varying practices. That means a brand name on the bag does not guarantee consistent chemical safety, particularly for consumers buying on price rather than provenance. Consumers also report shorter shelf life and quick deterioration with generic bags, and much of that stems from how produce is handled before distribution. Companies like Keelings aggregate produce from multiple farms, and when demand forecasting misses the mark, potatoes can sit in cold storage too long or in less than ideal conditions before being packed and shipped. The result is bags that seem fine at purchase but develop decay or sprouting within days. Transparency is another structural issue. Big fresh produce suppliers rarely disclose detailed sourcing data or explain how grading, storage, and distribution decisions are made. When you buy a bag of potatoes from a supermarket that sources through Keelings, you have almost no information on when the tubers were harvested, how they were stored, or how far they traveled. That lack of transparency makes it harder to hold any single brand accountable when quality fails. From my perspective, that systemic opacity is a risk in itself. A trusted name on a bag should not be a blind guarantee of freshness or safety. Until large distributors like Keelings offer clearer traceability, consistent quality data, and visible accountability for storage and pesticide controls, cautious consumers would be wise to treat packaged fresh produce, including potatoes, with scrutiny rather than assumption of quality. Because as misleading as Keelings is, the next brand shows what happens when warnings are ignored repeatedly. 1. Albert Bartlett UK Raw Potato Brand. Albert Bartlett is one of the most recognizable branded potato suppliers in the United Kingdom, and that visibility is exactly why criticism around it matters. Despite heavy marketing around heritage, farming pride, and quality, consumer feedback over the years repeatedly highlights inconsistency, premature spoilage, and storage-related problems. Many buyers report Albert Bartlett potatoes sprouting unusually fast, sometimes within days of purchase. That is a classic sign of extended storage or stress before retail. Potatoes do not sprout quickly when they are freshly harvested and properly handled. mishandled. Rapid sprouting points to age, light exposure, or fluctuating storage conditions earlier in the supply chain. Greening complaints are another recurring issue. Consumers report green patches developing even when potatoes are stored correctly at home. Greening is not cosmetic. It indicates elevated solanine, a natural toxin that causes bitterness and can trigger nausea or headaches. Trimming does not always remove the risk, yet many shoppers assume it does. Texture and consistency is also frequently mentioned. Bags that look uniform on the outside often cook unevenly. Some potatoes turn watery, others stay dense, and others darken excessively when roasted. That inconsistency reflects mixed age batches and reconditioned stock rather than fresh uniform produce. Albert Bartlett also relies heavily on sealed plastic packaging, which preserves shelf appearance but hides moisture buildup and internal decay. Several consumers report opening bags that smelled musty or contained potatoes already breaking down internally, despite appearing fine at purchase. What makes Albert Bartlett especially problematic is expectation. It is sold as a premium branded potato. Shoppers pay more, expecting reliability. When quality fails at that price point, disappointment turns into distrust quickly. From a consumer perspective, Albert Bartlett demonstrates that branding does not equal freshness. Large-scale branded potato operations face the same storage, aging, and handling pressures as supermarkets, but with higher expectations attached. If a potato brand cannot consistently deliver freshness, predictable cooking, and safe storage behavior, the name on the bag becomes irrelevant. For many shoppers, Albert Bartlett has crossed that line often enough to justify caution or avoidance.